Yes, we can hear. Okay, hello everyone. Moav, my colleague, took a bit of a time. I'm going to close it with him later. Okay, so our panel deals with the continued struggle against the Iranian-led axis of resistance. We titled it Beirut Meets Sana. Sounds like a great place to live, but not for real. And I want to start, if you will, with what happened 2 days ago. 2 days ago, we saw at Beirut the funeral of Nasrallah, the former leader of Hezbollah, that during the last few years, especially after Al-Quds leader was assassinated, he became the barometer of this axis, the glue that holds it together. And I think that his elimination, and there are many things, many POVs we can talk about regarding that since October 7th, it was in Yemen and other branches. And I want to start with you now. Hezbollah, this is the proxy, this is the cherry. I want to start, first of all, with talking about what we had since October 7th, because since that has first must understand is the first morning led to a female panel. I'm also glad, unrelated to Hezbollah. Hezbollah after October 8th is not the same Hezbollah as the day before. And during this past year, truly the organization, not during the first 11 months, but during the last 3 months, took the hardest blow it could have imagined. And we find the organization of Hezbollah today weakened and battered. And I'm not going to repeat all the different components of the loss that they've experienced, only very briefly. I mean, it was presented here earlier this morning. We're talking about the fact that they lost 80 of its fire of its arms, and 4,000 men were killed and many were injured of the warriors. And the peak that influenced quite a lot beyond the beeper attack, that had a psychological effect. It was the question that people from Hezbollah, from the leadership Hezbollah, in the lead of the leaders. But today Hezbollah is at a point where was created in their administration, both in the political leadership and obviously when it comes to the military leadership and these sort of things. And today the person who is lacking charisma, his name is Naim Qassem, and it was amazing. Always talk about, I mean, a leader creates. By this case, it's not only all of heirs to this leader, and therefore it has the influence. Yeah, so his heir, Yusufuddin, was eliminated a few days after him. So only few men were left behind that are able to fill his shoes. And add to that the toppling of the Assad regime and the fact that many of the ways of transporting weapons and budgets are now blocked for them, for Hezbollah. And all this reflected what is now happening within Lebanon, the great loss of the very high status it had within the political system of Lebanon as someone who makes the decisions. And he, in fact, the one who can and make it so that the new leaders at Lebanon, the Prime Minister disagreed, but he had to accept them. He was that prime minister. Very low representation in the government. The government principles make decisions about making peaceful decisions, and he lost his ability to block decisions. that very third block that has built. And so they are at a very difficult point, which comes, and the way they behave with what we are doing after the war. Okay, and we'll soon the future, but now if you permit, Orna, I will now move on to Inbal. I want to talk to you about, I think that there are many didn't you before, and I'm talking now about the Houthis in Tayman. In Yemen, Inbal has a very great affectionate to, not to them, but to dealing with them, that is. I want to ask the are in the axis of resistance, and also that at the end of the day, it was quite good since I do agree with you. It seems that even after 5 strikes by Israel on Sana'a in Yemen and Saudi land, the home region of the Houthi rebels, and also at Al Hudaydah, and the 3 main of that region that are in fact the lifeline of Yemen when it comes to entering and exiting, having imports and exports. And the price that they are paying is quite low, I would say, at least when it comes to see compared to what it's. So even morning, that is, ends for them. The profit is great, even regionally, their status, and obviously within Yemen. For them, positions very strong, meaningful force agreement that will be taking shape regarding Yemen. And we are always looking at the Houthi. It's been going over and the forces there that are asking to get some recognition, to get a piece of Yemen and reshape it. And all in all, this whole story of the war also has another layer, their involvement in our war here. It has one layer of fighting for the future of Yemen, for the future shape of Yemen, and it will influence the 20th century now influences the 21st century. About the Houthi, people keep saying Houthi means Iran and Iran means Houthis. They're equal. But it seems that at least when it comes to the control of the head of this octopus, it's not absolute to that. They the axis of resistance. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are a proxy. We must separate. There's this very from Israel point of view anyways, to create a system headed by Iran, and that if we bases see them toppling down, and maybe it's a bit just if we're also looking at the Lebanese and Syrian arenas, but when it comes to the case of the Houthi, this is quite different when it comes to that, different from the Iranian military. To compare the relationships, I believe, and I'm not the only one who holds to this, and it's not a proxy when in the same way we think of Hezbollah or the Iraq militias. There's an entity here that is the result of an inner Yemen constellation that has been growing around the mountains of North Yemen in the periphery, with tribal elements as a group, as a movement of Islam, of revival of the Shiite Islam. That is also an important angle. It's the Shia that we see in Iran, and it's not a natural alliance. They're not pragmatic from this idea. They go to Islam world in order to connect themselves to the Palestinians. So it's quite dynamic, and they're very practical when it comes to that. But it is an internal entity that started operating because they had criticism over the government, and because of they were being when it comes to center and periphery, center, and also as a societal movement. They were much against the government. They also added to that the hatred towards the USA, towards Israel, so that's ideology already. And within a couple of decades, since from the mountains of Yemen, they've made themselves into a region. But the partnership, as important as it may be, and this must be said very clearly, their military intensification and abilities that we think very clearly are absolutely the result of their alliance with But I wouldn't too rapidly put them together in the same basket with Iran. I'm trying to be academically or historically accurate. It's practical. At the end of the day, we have a toolbox that we want to operate with, and it's better a conception that is a bit more complex regarding them. Okay, we spoke of Hezbollah and Carmit. I'm now moving on to you. You have a great affection to the Syrians. Hezbollah, since and between Hezbollah and the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and even Iranians directly. I want to take you to Syria after October 7th. It seemed that the Assad regime was very passive compared away from the previous panel and trying to understand what is now happening in Syria during the past Iranian perspective. I would say that the Syrian project, the Iranian project in Syria, failed or at least disappointed the Axis twice. First time, really remained quiet compared to the arenas are representing. They fought and put a lot of effort to become of this multi-arena battle against Israel. And Syria was quiet, and that's a surprising act, because we've been dealing with Syria for a long time, but this great project has in turning Syria into an arena that is part of the Axis for moving weapons, etc., to militarize Hezbollah, to weaponize and militias that have been coming through Syria for years, investing in Syria to make it an active the Iranians. And at the end of the day, on the moment of truth, where are they? It was truly very surprising to see that Assad did not join in. And the main reason was that Assad, as we've known him, what moves him more than anything is survival. He did not want to jeopardize himself, his security, his status, his political status in Syria after more than a decade of a civil war, and didn't want to jeopardize. Also, let's mention the fact that at the beginning of the war, he also received some threatening is do not join this battle because your safety would really be in a great question mark. That's true. And also let me add that it also created tensions between him and the other partners in the members of the Axis, the Iranians, for example. And Assad became closer to the Emirates during the past few years, and the Saudis. So that's also part of it. Yes, so Syria did not only not become part of the Axis against Israel, but Assad during these months also stopped the Axis from acting on certain levels, and he demanded the different militias not to act from Syria, as in not to jeopardize his fragile status. So they were quite tamed, and Assad didn't of acting. And so, given some blows, and the project the toppling the Shah regime, and that's it. This strategic asset fell down, but do not say farewell already to the Syria, find their way to base influence and of strength to come from the window. Okay, Orna, to you. Let's talk about facing forward. We talked, but I do want, if you may, shortly about. I've been asked repeatedly during the past few months what happened with the scenario of terror. Everybody has been scaring us, terrorizing us. There's going to be a very intense war. We're all going to suffer very badly. Many injured, many killed. Everybody was searching to buy generators for their homes and all of that. So I think the public might be interested, and we should discuss it shortly. So first of all, I need to explain that this scenario we did not promote it very widely, but we did talk about it as well. There was the scenario of reference of the worst case scenario, and we talked about the worst possible case scenario. And what in fact happened was that came from the decision made by Nasrallah, who decided that he's not going all out with all his firepower that he has from the very beginning of the war, but he made a choice by limited war, and he went along with that for 11 months. And I believe he would have continued if we wouldn't have initiated a very broad move. And during those 11 months, we managed to truly harm the abilities of Hezbollah. And I think he made a very and it was didn't want to waste, he and Iran didn't want to waste their abilities under these circumstances. Two, he lost this surprise element. Hamas surprised us, which is why Hezbollah lost that element, and the IDF immediately deployed at the north. The Americans stood by us quite immediately, which could have made it into a regional war. And the fourth and last point was that he was afraid of the way it will affect Hezbollah organization in Lebanon. And these were concerns that be a very realistic say a limited war, but it also led to quite a great harm. In all these months, the harm was accumulated, and it was quite great both on our side and on their side. So his abilities during the later phases to operate were at the same level were quite limited. And I want to take you back to the present day, because you told me behind the scenes that you believe that there are opportunities, many opportunities for Israel in the Lebanese arena, the new situation and everything that you've just explained about the weakness of Hezbollah, military-wise, politically-wise. So last year we talked about threats. This year we truly could speak about opportunities, and in the Lebanese arena, I'm talking about two different kinds of opportunities, one vis-a-vis Hezbollah and the other vis-a-vis the state of Lebanon. We have the opportunity, first of all, to maintain, and second, maybe even to aggravate their status and truly change their position and their abilities to challenge us and to act as an organization the way they have been, as an independent militia within Lebanon. And I think we received three main tools when it comes to that allow us to, that enable us to do that. Is the present status, the result actions. Two is that on our end, we've changed our state of mind, and we understand now that it's impossible to continue on with just accepting what they're doing without reacting. And I think that it will bring a completely different behavior by the military and political echelons when it comes to Lebanon. And we received some tools that the agreement brought to us, two very important things that we mustn't forget. One is the agreement allows us some sort of freedom of action to continue harming them if UNIFIL and others are not able to perform it, and then we go to the committee and we perform different things that we've been doing during the past few months in order to stop them from rehabilitating, from recovering their abilities. So that's the freedom of action. And the second thing is that we are backed by the USA quite strongly today. And it's not necessarily related to Trump. Even an American general, due to the agreement, there's an American general that is stationed there, and he's someone we can talk to, and he understands the Israeli position, the challenges, etc. And he pretty much goes along with us. So I think that when it comes to that, it's a great opportunity to change the power relations with Hezbollah. Secondly is vis-a-vis the Lebanese government, and let me end with this note. I believe that the days will say, future will say, and we put it into the policy paper that we've handed out as a vision to change the relations between Israel and Lebanon, with a great hope that we will come to relations of peace at the end of the road, and Lebanon could join the Abraham agreements. But I think it's only the very first phase of this process, and it has a lot to do with the way the new leadership at Lebanon will be able to position itself and deal with the challenge positioned to them by Hezbollah, and not being drawn into a civil war. And this also necessitates us to take into account what is happening there, on the other hand, with the way that their leadership is handling things, and that they are not Zionists, of course, they are pro-Lebanese. We need to see how we are not giving them a bear hug and allow them to base themselves within the Lebanese state, and at the end of the day reach a change of reality facing us. I'll just want to say, as Carmit said about the Iranians in Syria, same thing with Lebanon. It's not yet the moment to say farewell to Iranian interference. Yes, of course. And a key point is that it also has to do with the rehabilitation and recovery of the Western states and the Bay states. Yes, absolutely very important. Iran goes, and we've already seen signals. They want to rehabilitate Hezbollah. They want to give them budget. They want to give them weapons. The new leadership in Lebanon does not want this to happen. We saw last week that they decided to stop flights from Iran to Lebanon. We must be wise and see how we can help them with that. And of course, Hezbollah is still there, and we must see how we are dealing with that. Carmit, I now want to talk to you. I think the greatest enigma around the region that everybody here in Israel is curious about is, of course, the new regime in Syria, the new leader that is today opening the International Dialogue Committee in Israel. When we look at a new regime, we say, is it good or bad for us, for Jews, for Israelis? So where do we go from here? That's a great question, and I don't think anyone has the answer to it, neither in Syria, probably not even Bashar himself. The main characteristic today of the arena is uncertainty. There are many question marks. Where is Syria headed on several aspects? This axis between radical regime, extreme regime, Islamist, jihadist regime, is it going that way? Or are we facing a more optimistic scenario of the Bashar leaving behind him his Shia characteristic, taking a more pragmatic principles and trying to balance Syria and making them more calm? And from the way we see things, from following up, and I'm saying it very cautiously because it's too early to determine the direction, but it seems all in all, it seems to be a very quiet transfer of powers, and all the right things that should be said by the new regime and should be done. And you've mentioned the International Committee, the dialogues with minorities. We don't see religious and forced being extremely. We did hear about gender separation in Damascus, but still women are being appointed to high-ranking positions. There are indications to both ways or to both scenarios I just mentioned, but at the moment it seems a bit more optimistic, more positive, but it's still early to say. And I think that from our angle in Israel, we should be prepared to both options, the pessimistic and the optimistic scenarios. Pessimistically, he might not be able to unite his state. They are quite at rifts, and we might see them dismantling a lot of chaos and violence that might also leak into Israel. So there's great importance to our military measures taken today. On the other hand, Syria might be able to balance itself and become more mitigated, and we should also prepare ourselves to that scenario and not solely rely for long term on military force. We can't just remain in the world of military tools. We must also be open to translating the military achievements that are so impressive, I believe, on so many arenas, including in Syria, but we need to be able to translate these achievements to diplomatic achievements. We can't leave the IDF forces there at the south of Syria forever. And my predicament is that the more we stay there, the negative potential will grow stronger. And if we are not at the top of the priorities of this new regime that is now facing many challenges, we will slowly we will draw fire, and we will also climb up to their higher priority for them. So Israel must be very clear with strategy towards Syria and know how to put conditions and terms that will allow us to gradually and carefully back away from the border border there, first and foremost, quiet border, safety at the border, pushing away any extreme entities, of course, including Iran and Hezbollah that we've already mentioned, taking care of the minorities, managing the unconventional weapons that still remains in Syria, and we must be able to put these things on the table, these terms, and maybe give the opportunity to a more positive scenario. So speaking of the axis of resistance, the new regime right now is keeping himself quite away from Hezbollah and Iran. Question is if other entities there, such as the Turks and Qatari, are going to make things change. We will see, as you said. I want to end with you, the Houthis. What are we going to do with them later on? What are we going to do with, how to say it, with this undomesticated unit? Because I think they're going to stay with us for a long time. It seems that we are starting to get to know them, which is good for them. They didn't show too much interest 18 months ago, until 18 months ago. If you'd ask anyone what is going on there, the civil war there, nobody, it was a forgotten war. And they brought themselves to the front of the stage on October 7th. As horrible as it sounds, it was a wonderful opportunity for them. And they were able to demonstrate their military ability, also signal to the Saudi on the one hand and to the Emirates on the other hand that these abilities that are now being used against Israel or in the maritime arena could also be used for other directions if need comes. Saudi, I must say, since the middle of 2022 have been negotiating with them to end their involvement in the coalition, but it has not yet ended. I think the Houthi, who said they will not attack Israel, but are very cautiously watching looking at what is now happening with the deal to release the hostages and the bodies of hostages, they would probably have a harder time releasing the maritime arena, and the Red Sea is not quiet, and they are still acting there. From the moment they got a grip there, it will be harder for them to let go, and they will need to find another way to navigate it. So, but at the end, taking it back, I always say, before Iran, before Gaza, we need to bring the Houthis back home to Yemen. And all these things are channeled in order to profit back home within Yemen. We can't ignore them today. When the Saudis started the war, they said, we are here to eradicate the Iranian branch in Yemen and bring back the legitimate regime. They weren't able to do this for now over than a decade. The day after, beyond the challenge that they set, they also are quite victorious, especially in Yemen and more so in the regional space with their neighboring countries. Okay, we will remain with the Houthi challenge, the new Syria, Hezbollah, in the era of after Hezbollah, Orna, Inbal, Carmit. Thank you so much, all of you, for this fascinating panel.